Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. My name is Thomas, and a few weeks ago, I thought I had a normal life, a steady job, a loving wife, and a smart, curious 10-year-old son named Eli. But everything I believed shattered the morning I walked into the kitchen and found a handwritten note that simply said, "I need to follow my heart. Handle the debt. It's yours now." My wife was gone, along with our savings, our future, and every illusion I ever had about love. What came next? A betrayal I never saw coming, and a plan for justice I never imagined would begin with my son. They say you never truly know someone until they leave you broken and holding the bill. For 12 years, I thought I knew Rachel. She wasn't perfect, none of us are, but she had this way of lighting up a room, of making even a dull Tuesday night feel like a spontaneous adventure. Her laugh echoed through our house like wind chimes in spring. She was impulsive, yes, but charmingly so, or so I believed. Looking back, I should have seen the cracks. I should have heard the ticking bomb beneath the surface of our marriage. But hindsight's a cruel friend, always arriving too late to stop the explosion. It started the morning everything fell apart. I woke up to silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. That tells your gut something is off before your brain has even caught up. Our bed was cold beside me. The clock read 6:42 a.m., not unusual. Rachel sometimes liked to get up early and walk around the block with her coffee, claiming the air helped her think. But there was no coffee smell, no creaking floorboards, no distant hum of her humming some out-of-tune pop song. Just nothing. I called out her name. No answer. My heart skipped. I slid out of bed and padded toward the kitchen. That's when I saw it. A piece of paper, torn from a notebook, sitting right there on the table like it had been waiting for me. Her handwriting, loopy and casual, as if she were writing a grocery list instead of detonating my world. "Thomas, I need to follow my heart. Handle the debt. It's yours now." That was it. 12 years of marriage. One child. A home. A life. Reduced to 15 words and a half-empty cup of coffee still sitting on the counter. For a second, I laughed. I actually laughed. The sound bounced off the walls, sharp and bitter. I laughed because the absurdity of it all was too much to process. My wife had left me, and apparently, she'd also left me a little surprise. Debt? What debt? I hadn't borrowed a cent. I watched our spending like a hawk. I balanced spreadsheets for fun. We weren't rich, but we weren't drowning either. Or so I thought. And just like that, the air grew heavier. I rushed to the bedroom. Her clothes were gone. Only hangers remained. The drawer where she kept her jewelry was empty. No toothbrush in the bathroom. No suitcase by the door. Gone. Rachel had vanished. Not just from the house, but from the life we had built. Except she didn't leave me entirely alone. No, she left me with something far worse than silence. Our son, Eli, 10 years old. Brilliant. Kind. Far too observant for his own good. I heard him stir down the hall, and suddenly the weight of the situation hit me like a freight train. How do you tell your child that his mother walked out? I couldn't. Not yet. I shoved the note into my back pocket just as Eli wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled. "Morning, bud," I said, forcing a smile so hard I felt my jaw crack. "You hungry?" He nodded, yawning. "Yeah. Is Mom at work already?" I froze. God, I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him she was at the store, or grabbing coffee, or anything. Anything but the truth. "She stepped out early," I said instead. "Said she needed to clear her head." "Again?" he muttered, plopping down at the table. He didn't question it. Not yet. But I saw it in his eyes, the way they flicked toward the door and lingered a second too long. He was processing, cataloging. Eli was always good at spotting patterns. And I knew, deep down, that this wouldn't be the last time he asked where she went. I made him toast. Burned it, of course. My hands were shaking. I poured orange juice and stared at the kitchen wall like it might give me answers. But there were none. Only questions. 1,000 of them. What debt? How much? When? Why? Why didn't she tell me? How long had she been planning this? And what kind of woman leaves her child without even saying goodbye? The kind, I guess, who believes in following her heart, even if it leads her straight into someone else's bed and out of our lives. As Eli munched on his toast, unaware of the storm that had just hit our home, I turned away and gripped the countertop so hard my knuckles went white. I had no plan, no answers, just a note and a boy who didn't deserve any of this. But as I looked at Eli, innocent, still half asleep, still believing the world was safe, I made a silent vow. I would protect him, even if it broke me. Because Rachel may have walked away from her responsibilities, but I wouldn't. I couldn't. Eli finished his toast in silence, legs swinging beneath the kitchen chair, oblivious to the war raging in my head. Or so I thought. I washed the dishes with trembling hands, the note from Rachel burning a hole in my pocket. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her handwriting. Carefree, selfish, final. The woman who once promised to grow old with me had walked out with a suitcase and left me holding a mystery dad and a 10-year-old boy who deserved none of this. And yet, there he was, calm, observant, chewing slowly, as if trying to read between the cracks in my voice. "Dad," he said quietly, "are you okay?" That question nearly broke me. I turned toward him, dish towel in hand, and forced the kind of smile I knew he wouldn't believe. "Yeah, bud. Just thinking about stuff." Eli squinted. "You're thinking hard. You only do that when bills come in or when mom's mad." Sharp as ever. I chuckled, but it felt hollow. "You know me too well." He nodded. "You haven't eaten." "I'm not hungry," I muttered. He looked down at his plate. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "If you need help, just tell me. I can handle it." It took everything in me not to cry right there at the sink. How did we get here? How did my son become the one offering me comfort? He was 10. He should be worrying about homework, not whether his dad can keep it together after his mom vanished. I walked over, ruffled his hair, and kissed the top of his head. "Thanks, buddy, but it's adult stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." He gave a small nod, but I could tell he didn't believe me. He saw too much. Always had. That evening, after he went to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark, staring at the blank TV screen. My thoughts were loud, screaming over one another. What debt? Where had she gone? Why did she leave now? Who the hell was she with? I grabbed my laptop, heart pounding. Maybe I could make sense of the madness. Maybe the bank account would tell me something. It did. The savings account. Eli's future, the one we'd been building for college, for emergencies, for life, was nearly drained. The transactions. God. Rachel had been pulling thousands of dollars in small chunks over the past 3 months. Concert tickets, hotel stays, flights, spa appointments, all under my nose. All while I was working overtime and eating leftovers to stretch our budget. My hands trembled on the keyboard. I slammed the laptop shut. She didn't just abandon us. She robbed us. A lump formed in my throat. I stared at the floor, paralyzed. This was no longer about betrayal. This was theft, cold, calculated, and cruel. And the worst part? Eli would eventually have to know. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak of the house reminded me she was gone. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the scarf hanging by the door. Her book lay half-finished on the nightstand like she planned to return. But she wouldn't. She had made her choice. And now, I had to make mine. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I packed Eli's lunch. Made him pancakes, burned again. He didn't say much, just watched me like he was collecting data, measuring my silences, noticing the heaviness in my footsteps. "Is Mom coming back today?" he asked suddenly, just before heading out the door for school. I froze, spatula in midair. "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. "But no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. I promise." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, slowly, like he was choosing to believe me, even if he wasn't sure I believed myself. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at a pile of unopened mail. I didn't want to know what was inside, but I had to. I needed answers, even if they hurt. One envelope caught my eye, red letters across the top, final notice. I tore it open. My breath caught in my throat. A loan statement. $20,000. Rachel's name on top, but our shared address listed as collateral. The fine print was clear. Failure to pay would affect both parties. I read it again and again. She didn't just steal from our future. She shackled me to it. Legally, financially, personally. She detonated the bomb and left me to absorb the shrapnel. And what was I supposed to do now? Go to the police? Sue her? I had a job to hold, a house to keep, a son to raise. I couldn't afford to break. Not now. Not ever. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. The walls felt like they were closing in. My heart raced, panic prickling under my skin. Then I heard the door open. Eli was home from school, already talking as he kicked off his shoes. "Hey Dad, guess what? I read this article about robotics. Wait till I show you." He walked into the kitchen, saw my face, and stopped. "You okay?" he asked again. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, buddy. Just a long day." He didn't press, but he didn't leave either. He sat across from me and said, "If it's about Mom, I'm not a baby, you know." I sighed. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to stop pretending. "She left us with some problems," I said slowly. "Financial ones. But I'll figure it out." He didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded and said, "Maybe I can help." And this time, I didn't laugh. That night, after Eli had gone to bed, I found myself staring at the loan letter again. The red text across the top glared at me like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Final notice. I ran my fingers over the edges of the paper, half expecting it to burst into flames from the sheer rage simmering in my chest. Rachel didn't just walk away. She detonated every piece of stability we had and left me and our son standing in the fallout. I couldn't sleep. My mind raced in loops, memories, calculations, desperate questions with no answers. Around midnight, I gave up pretending and grabbed my laptop. I logged into our shared banking account, hoping to find something, anything, that made sense. What I found made my stomach drop. The college fund account we'd been growing since Eli was born, the one we had sworn not to touch under any circumstances, was nearly empty. Over the last 3 months, Rachel had been quietly bleeding it dry. Hotel stays, spa treatments, flights, boutique shopping, expensive dinners, all done without a single conversation, all masked behind the usual chaos of daily life. She'd smiled at me over dinner while siphoning away our future. I scrolled through the transactions, heart pounding, my fingers shaking over the trackpad. Thousands of dollars gone. Just like that. She didn't even try to hide it. It was all there, plain as day. The money she used to disappear, to start over with someone else, it came straight out of our son's future. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. Deception on a level I hadn't even imagined her capable of. How long had she been planning this? How could I have missed it? I slammed the laptop shut and buried my face in my hands, trying to stop the tidal wave of fury and helplessness building inside me. I had worked overtime for months, skipped vacations, stretched every dollar to keep that account growing. For Eli. Not for her to use it like some open credit card while gallivanting around with her new lover. I heard the creak of the hallway floor and looked up to see Eli standing there, sleepy-eyed and clutching a blanket. "Dad, are you okay?" I tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "Yeah, bud. Just adult stuff." He walked over, his eyes falling on the pile of unopened mail and my trembling hands. "Is this about Mom?" he asked softly. I hesitated. I didn't want to burden him, but he already knew too much. He'd seen the change in the air the moment she left. "She left us with some problems," I said carefully. "Financial problems." Eli's eyes narrowed, and for a second, he looked older than 10. Wiser. Quieter. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad enough," I admitted. "But I'll figure it out. I always do." He didn't say anything right away. He just sat across from me and studied my face. Then, calmly, he said, "Maybe I can help." I almost laughed again, but it caught in my throat. There was something in his eyes that stopped me, something resolute. Like he'd already made up his mind about whatever he was going to do. "Thanks, kiddo," I said, ruffling his hair. "But this is something I have to handle." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't agree. He gave me a look I'd seen before. The one he got when he was building Legos and didn't stop until every single piece was perfect, no matter how long it took. I should have known then. He was already plotting something, but I was too caught up in my own spiral to notice. After he went back to bed, I stared at the dark ceiling and tried to think straight. The loan was real. The savings were gone. Rachel had used our address to secure the loan, meaning the debt legally tied back to me. If payments weren't made, I'd be the one left holding the bag. And the clock was ticking. The bank didn't care who took the money. They wanted it back. And they wanted it now. I thought about calling her. Thought about screaming down the phone and demanding an explanation. But what would be the point? She hadn't responded to a single message since she left. No calls, no texts. It was like she vanished into thin air. Rachel had become a ghost. One that haunted me with every bill, every bank statement, every empty spot in the house where her presence used to be. I sat back at the table, heart racing, staring at the note again. Handle the debt. It's yours now. Like it was some task she'd left on a to-do list. Pick up groceries. Pay off a $20,000 loan I secretly took behind your back. Don't forget to feed the cat. Except we didn't have a cat. We just had Eli. And me. And no plan. I felt like I was drowning, every breath harder than the last. But even as the walls closed in, I kept thinking about Eli. I couldn't let him see me break. Couldn't let him carry this weight. I had to be strong. If not for me, then for him. Even if it killed me. So I did what I always did when life backed me into a corner. I got up, rolled up my sleeves, and started planning. Because Rachel might have burned the house down, but I'd be damned if I let her take my son's future with her. The days blurred into each other after that. I spent most of my time on autopilot. Waking up before the sun, forcing myself through work, juggling calls to the bank during lunch breaks, and collapsing at night, mentally exhausted but unable to sleep. The pressure of the loan, the empty savings account, and the unanswered questions from Eli weighed on me like cinder blocks tied around my chest. Rachel still hadn't responded. No texts. No calls. It was like she'd never existed, except for the debt collectors now circling like vultures and the scent of her perfume still clinging to the bedroom curtains. And then there was Eli. My boy watched everything. He never pushed, never pried, but I could feel it. His gaze, always alert, always reading me like a puzzle he was determined to solve. One evening, after dinner, I found him sitting at the dining table with his tablet propped up, fingers flying across the screen. His expression was focused, too focused for a 10-year-old just browsing YouTube or playing a game. "What are you up to, bud?" I asked. He glanced up briefly. "Just doing some research." "On what?" He grinned. "You'll find out soon." Normally, I might have pressed further. But something about the way he said it, the calm confidence in his voice, made me hesitate. It wasn't defiance. It was purpose. Like he was on a mission. That wasn't the first time either. Over the next few days, I caught him asking strange questions, subtle, but specific. "Do you remember when Mom got her new phone? Did she ever say what apps she used to track her steps? Do we still have access to her email?" I answered half distracted, too preoccupied with budgeting nightmares and calls from the loan agency. It wasn't until one night, when I saw him scribbling notes in a little notebook he usually reserved for science fair ideas, that it hit me. Eli was planning something. And he wasn't just playing detective. He was working a case. One evening, I sat on the couch in silence, trying to calculate if I could pick up a second job without losing my current one, when Eli entered the room holding his notebook like it was classified intelligence. "Dad," he said, dead serious. "You remember that GPS app we downloaded after I got lost on that hike?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, we put it on all our phones after that." "What?" He opened his notebook and pointed to a map drawn in pencil. "I used it to find her." I blinked. "What?" "Mom's phone is still on the account. I tracked it." I stared at him, stunned. "You did what?" "She's at a place called Lakeside Grove Lodge." I double-checked. "It's real. It's about 3 hours from here. She's been there all week." My breath caught. He wasn't guessing. He had proof. And then he added, with a calm so unsettling it sent a chill through me, "Mark is with her. He works at her old office. She used some of the loan money to pay for the trip." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "How do you know his name?" "I called her old office while you were at work," he said plainly. "Told them I was her son. Asked if she was on vacation. The receptionist told me everything. People really open up if you sound sad enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My 10-year-old had pulled off a full-blown investigation, complete with reconnaissance, impersonation, and data tracking, all while I was drowning in bills and self-pity. "Eli," I said, rubbing my temples, "you can't just do things like that. That's not." "She left us, Dad," he said, cutting me off. "She left you with her debt. She left me without a mom. And now she's out there pretending we don't exist." His voice was low but steady, his words slicing cleaner than any adult could. "She doesn't get to just walk away," he added. "Not after what she did." I couldn't argue. I didn't want to. I just stared at him. This brilliant, stubborn, painfully mature little boy who was fighting for the family that one woman had tried to destroy. "Okay," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's your plan?" He smiled. Not the innocent smile of a child, but the quiet, determined grin of someone who knew they were right. "First, We freeze the loan account so she can't spend another dime. I blinked. What? Then, he continued, we gather every piece of evidence we can. And after that, we confront her. It was crazy. It was borderline illegal. It was bold, reckless, and wildly beyond anything a 10-year-old should be thinking about. And yet, it was the most hopeful I'd felt in weeks. Because maybe, just maybe, we had a way out of this mess. And it started with Eli. 3 days passed after Eli dropped his plan on me, and in those days, everything changed. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were strategizing. Eli worked quietly, obsessively. He gathered documents, tracked Rachel's movements, and compiled a spreadsheet of transactions pulled from our bank account and loan statements. At night, I'd find him buried under paper piles at the kitchen table, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his tablet. I tried to make him stop, tried to remind him that he was still a kid, but every time, he looked at me with that same calm determination. She started this, he said once. We're just finishing it. And as much as I hated what all this was doing to him, I couldn't argue. He was right. Rachel had turned our world upside down, and Eli was the only one brave enough to flip it back. Then, just when the dust started to settle, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, area code from upstate. My gut twisted instantly. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hello. A beat of silence. Then, Thomas. Her voice. Sharp. Frantic. No longer calm and detached like it had been in the note. This was something else, fear. Rachel, I said slowly, standing up from the couch, my grip tightening on the phone. To what do I owe the pleasure? Don't play games with me, she snapped. Why is my bank account frozen? Why are the police asking questions? What the hell did you do? I almost laughed. The irony was exquisite. You're asking me? I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. You disappear with 20 grand in stolen cash, leave a 10-year-old behind, and now you're shocked the world isn't just clapping for your fresh start? Don't get self-righteous, she hissed. You don't know what I've been through. I needed out. You needed a boyfriend and a bank account. I cut in. You found both. But you forgot one thing. What? Our son, I said coldly. You remember him? Eli. There was a pause, brief, jagged. Thomas, what does Eli have to do with any of this? Everything, I said. While you were sipping cocktails at a lakeside resort, our son was cleaning up the mess you left behind. He tracked your location, collected the bank data, reported the fraud. And yes, he froze the account. That's impossible, she stammered. He's just a kid. No, I said, my voice hard as stone. He's your kid, and he's 10 times the adult you ever were. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, shallow and shaky on the other end. For the first time in weeks, I heard it, genuine panic in her voice. You have to fix this, she said finally. Please. David's furious. His boss is asking questions about the loan. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I clenched my jaw. You didn't think? That much is clear. I wanted a fresh start. By stealing from your family. I didn't mean to hurt Eli, she whispered. You left him, Rachel, I said, my voice rising. You left him without a goodbye, without a call, without a cent. I panicked, she said. I thought I could fix it later. Later? I barked. Later? There is no later. Not anymore. Then, to my shock, she said something I hadn't expected. I'm sorry. It wasn't loud or defensive. It was soft, fractured, like a piece of the woman I once knew had just slipped out from beneath the layers of selfishness. But it wasn't enough. Sorry doesn't pay back what you stole, I said. Sorry doesn't erase the sleepless nights I've spent trying to figure out how to shield Eli from the fallout. Sorry doesn't fix a damn thing. There was silence on the line. Then, finally, I can't turn myself in, she said. I'll lose everything. You already did, I said quietly. You just haven't realized it yet. She started crying, not sobbing, just quiet, broken sounds that would have gutted me once. But now, they just made me tired. I have nothing without David, she said. He's threatening to leave. Then maybe you should have thought about that, I replied coldly, before you walked out the door with our life savings. Please, Thomas, don't let them arrest me. I exhaled sharply. That's not my call anymore. That's Eli's. Her breath caught. What? He's the one who put all this in motion. He's the one who's been keeping me from falling apart. You want to beg someone? Call your son. I hung up before she could answer. My hand was still shaking as I set the phone down. Across the room, I saw Eli standing in the hallway, arms crossed, a small smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. She sounded scared, he said. She is, I replied, rubbing my temples. You did good, kiddo. He nodded, satisfied. So what's next? I took a breath, my mind spinning. We wait, I said, and we make sure she can't hurt us again. Because for the first time, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting what was left and proving that even if she abandoned us, we wouldn't abandon ourselves. 3 days after the call, Eli looked up from his tablet at breakfast and said, "It's time." I knew exactly what he meant, and I wasn't ready. I stared into my coffee cup like it held a way out, but there was none. We'd tracked her. We had the evidence. We'd frozen the account, contacted the bank, even spoken to a lawyer. Everything that could be done from the shadows had been done. Now, it was time to confront the storm face to face. We don't have to do this, I told Eli. It's not your job. No, he said, pushing his cereal aside. It's ours. She needs to see what she left behind. The GPS tracker, still synced from that forgotten hiking trip, placed Rachel at a resort called Lakeside Grove Lodge, a fancy lakeside hideaway. The kind of place we used to dream about visiting as a family, back when we still believed we had won. Now she was living our dream, on stolen money, with another man. The drive there was quiet. I kept my eyes on the road, but my thoughts were a hurricane. I kept thinking, what if she laughs in our face? What if David gets involved? What if this backfires in front of Eli? And then I'd glance at my son, sitting there with a notebook in his lap, documents neatly clipped inside, his face calm and composed. He wasn't scared. He was ready. When we pulled into the gravel lot outside the lodge, my palms were slick with sweat. The sun glared off the lake, making everything seem too bright, too peaceful for what was about to happen. And then I saw her, Rachel, sitting on the patio, cocktail in hand, laughing. David was next to her, sunglasses on, relaxed, like he hadn't helped blow up an entire family. My stomach churned. How could she look so free? Eli glanced at me. You okay? I nodded, barely. Let's do this, he said. We walked toward the patio. Every step felt heavier than the last. I could feel the tension building like static in the air. Rachel spotted us before we reached the table. Her smile died mid-laugh. Her eyes went wide. She stood, stunned. Thomas? Eli. Her voice cracked on our names. I stopped a few feet from her table, arms crossed. Didn't expect to see us? What are you doing here? She asked, trying to keep her voice level. David looked annoyed, like we were waitstaff who'd interrupted his afternoon. This isn't a social visit, I said coldly. You didn't think you could just walk away, did you? David raised an eyebrow. Look, buddy, we're in the middle of something. Don't. I snapped, my eyes locking onto his. This isn't about you. Not yet. Rachel tried to regain control. Thomas, please. Not here. Oh, I think here is perfect, I said, pulling out a folder from my jacket. Dad, Eli said, stepping forward. Show her. I laid the documents on the table, one by one. Loan statements, transaction records, bank activity, GPS logs, the full story of her betrayal in black and white. Rachel's face paled as she flipped through the pages. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice held no conviction. You knew exactly what you were doing, I said. You didn't just leave. You plotted this. David stood abruptly. I didn't sign up for this crap, he muttered. I didn't know anything about. Save it, I snapped. You knew enough to run off with someone else's wife. He backed away from the table, shaking his head. This is family drama. I'm not getting dragged into it. David, wait. Rachel reached for him, panic surging across her face. I'll fix this, I promise, just don't leave. But David was already gone, walking fast toward the parking lot, muttering curses under his breath. And just like that, she was alone. Again. You can't do this to me, Rachel said, her voice trembling. You can't take everything. You took everything first, Eli said, his voice quiet but razor sharp. You left us with nothing. Now it's your turn. She looked at him, stunned. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just raw guilt. This is your chance to make it right, I said, my tone softening just a notch. Turn yourself in. Own what you did. Show Eli you're better than this. She sat down slowly, burying her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it wasn't enough. Let's go, I said to Eli, placing a hand on his shoulder. We walked away together, step by step, leaving her behind, surrounded by paperwork, broken promises, and the life she torched. I looked back one last time. She was still sitting there, alone at the table, head down, completely unraveling. And for the first time since she left, I felt something that had eluded me for weeks. Closure. She'd run. She'd lied. She'd betrayed. But we were still standing. And that meant we'd already won. After the confrontation at the lodge, there was no going back. Not for Rachel. Not for me. And especially not for Eli. On the drive home, neither of us spoke much. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the road. I kept my eyes on the horizon, both hands gripping the wheel, but my thoughts were spinning. I replayed every second of what had just happened. Rachel's shock, David's retreat, Eli's words cutting through like a blade. I should have felt satisfied, even triumphant. But what I felt was something much quieter, heavier. It was over. The moment we walked away from that table, the last thread connecting Rachel to our lives had snapped. And now came the fallout. The very next morning, I filed an official police report. I brought everything. Rachel's forged loan documents, our drained savings account history, the GPS logs showing her travel, even the emails I'd found in her old inbox tying her to David and the lavish purchases she tried to hide. Every piece of evidence Eli had helped gather was stacked neatly in a binder. The officer reviewing it looked both impressed and disturbed. "You said your son helped you gather this?" he asked, flipping through the pages. "He's 10, I said flatly. He let out a low whistle. "Smart kid. Smarter than most adults I deal with." I didn't know whether to be proud or sad about that. Maybe both. Within the week, they launched a full investigation. Rachel had falsified information to obtain the loan. She'd listed our joint residence without my knowledge, drained our savings, and fled with another man. All grounds for criminal charges. A warrant for her arrest was issued. It felt surreal hearing those words. Rachel. Arrest. Fraud. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. But another part, the part that had lived through the sleepless nights, the panic, the betrayal, knew it was long overdue. Then came the next step, custody. I met with a lawyer, determined to make sure Rachel could never again jeopardize Eli's safety or our stability. He reviewed our case, her abandonment, the financial damage, the complete lack of communication, and shook his head. "This isn't just a case of poor judgment," he said. "She effectively relinquished her rights the moment she left. You've got a strong position." We filed immediately. Rachel didn't show up for the court date. Not a call. Not an email. Nothing. Her absence said more than words ever could. The judge awarded me sole custody of Eli, along with a court order requiring Rachel to pay $500 per month in child support. I didn't expect her to actually pay a dime, but the lawyer assured me her wages, if she ever worked again, could be garnished. I left the courthouse with the papers in hand, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed easy. It was done. She couldn't touch us now. One of the last things I did that week was sell the camper van. It had sat in the driveway like a ghost from a former life. Another one of Rachel's impulsive purchases, made in the name of freedom and adventure. I listed it below value, just to be rid of it. The buyer didn't ask questions, just handed me the check and drove it away. As I stood in the empty driveway, watching it disappear down the street, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give us a small cushion. A new beginning. That night, Eli and I folded laundry together in the living room, reruns playing softly in the background. He was unusually quiet. I knew something was on his mind. Then he said, "You know, Dad, I don't think Mom was happy." I looked at him, surprised. "No," I said. "I don't think she was." He folded a shirt, then added, "Not with herself. Not with us. Not with anything. Maybe that's why she did all of it." I nodded slowly, struck by how much wisdom lived behind his young eyes. "You're probably right," I said. "But that still doesn't make it okay." "No," he agreed. "But I'm glad I have you. You don't give up." Those words hit me harder than anything Rachel ever said. They were simple, honest, and they reminded me of the one truth I'd clung to through it all. Eli was worth fighting for. Always. In the weeks that followed, we fell into a new rhythm. Mornings were quieter. The tension that used to linger in every corner of the house had faded. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. I tightened our budget, picked up extra shifts, met with a financial advisor. It was going to take time, but for once, the road ahead felt clear. Eli took it upon himself to help however he could. He started organizing the house, building chore schedules, even baking cookies to sell at school. One afternoon, I came home to find him standing proudly at the kitchen counter with a tray of chocolate chip cookies. "What's this?" I asked. He held up a hand-drawn flyer. 50 cents per cookie. All proceeds go to the Thomas and Eli Recovery Fund. I laughed harder than I had in months. "Kid," I said, ruffling his hair, "you're something else." And he was. Because while Rachel left us broken, Eli reminded me that we weren't beyond repair. We were still here, still standing, still a family. Life didn't magically fix itself after the court papers were signed or after I sold the camper van. The debt was lifted, the threat of Rachel removed, but the damage? That stuck around for a while. Quiet, stubborn, like an echo in a house that had seen too much. Eli and I had survived the storm, but we were still learning how to live in its aftermath. The nights were the hardest. Once the house settled and the lights dimmed, the weight of it all pressed down harder than ever. There were moments when I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I could have done something different. If I should have seen the signs sooner. If I was enough for Eli, now that it was just the two of us. And then I'd hear him. Footsteps padding down the hallway. A soft knock at my door. "Dad, can I sleep here tonight?" I never said no. He never said why. We both knew. He missed her, whether he admitted it or not. And I did too, in my own way. Not the woman she became, but the one I used to believe in. The one who used to hum in the kitchen and paint silly stars on Eli's bedroom walls. That version of Rachel was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. But grief doesn't care about logic. It just comes. In waves. And somehow, we kept floating. The final piece came a few weeks later. I met again with our lawyer and put a restriction in place. Rachel would no longer have access to our finances, and she couldn't legally contact Eli without court approval. It wasn't about revenge. It was about peace of mind. I needed to know that if she ever tried to crawl her way back into our lives, she'd have to do more than knock. She'd have to prove she deserved it. As the dust settled, a strange feeling started to take root. One I hadn't felt in months. Normalcy. It wasn't the same normal we'd had before. That version was dead and buried. This one was quieter, more intentional. Every little routine, every laugh, every ordinary moment felt like a small victory. Eli thrived. He took charge of the house like he was the CEO of our little operation. He had chore charts, homework schedules, grocery lists taped to the fridge with magnets shaped like dinosaurs. One night, he handed me a printed spreadsheet with our monthly expenses and said, "We need to talk about your coffee spending." I nearly choked laughing. "You know you're 10, right?" I said. "Exactly," he replied, dead serious. "Somebody's got to keep this place running." It wasn't all laughs, of course. There were hard moments too. I'd catch him staring at the front door sometimes, like maybe she'd walk back through it. Or I'd find him sitting alone with that blank look on his face. The one kids wear when they're trying not to cry. One night, while we were watching a movie, he turned to me and asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" I paused, the question hitting harder than I expected. "I don't know, buddy," I said truthfully. "But if she does, it'll be on our terms. She'll have to prove she's ready to be the mom you deserve." He nodded thoughtfully. "I don't think she will," he said quietly. "But that's okay. We're doing fine without her." And just like that, the tightness in my chest broke. Not in a painful way, but like the release of something I'd been holding too long. Pride, sadness, relief, all of it, tangled together in a single moment of quiet honesty. We were going to be okay. As spring rolled in, things started to bloom again, literally and figuratively. I picked up steady work. We repainted Eli's room, started cooking dinner together most nights. We even planted a small garden in the backyard. Eli named every tomato plant like they were our new roommates. He insisted on watering them with a turkey baster, because it's more precise. We had found our rhythm, our peace. I wish I could tell you Rachel turned her life around. That she came back, apologized in court, paid the child support on time, and did everything she could to rebuild what she broke. But that's not the world we live in. The last I heard, she was working odd jobs, couch hopping, and trying to stay out of trouble. Part of me pitied her. The other part, the one that remembers the nights Eli asked where his mom went, knew better than to let pity rewrite the truth. She made her choices. We made ours. And ours led to something real. The night before Eli's school science fair, we stayed up building his project, some elaborate model about renewable energy made out of popsicle sticks and wires. When it was finally done, we stood back and looked at it. "You know," he said, "this kind of turned out better than I expected." "Yeah," I said, patting his back. "It really did." And we weren't just talking about the project. Because somehow, through the chaos, the lies, the betrayal, we built something better. Something stronger. A family rebuilt from ashes. Just me and my son. And we were enough. Looking back, if there's one thing this entire ordeal taught me, it's that sometimes the people you trust most are capable of doing the deepest harm. But even in the aftermath, you still have the power to choose how you move forward. I learned that love without honesty is a slow-acting poison. That silence in a relationship doesn't mean peace. It often means something's already breaking. And perhaps the hardest truth of all, not everyone who walks into your life is meant to stay. But there's hope in that too. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found resilience in my son's steady voice. And I learned that family isn't built on promises. It's built on presence, effort, and showing up even when it's hard. To anyone listening, especially those who've lived long enough to know love, loss, and everything in between, my advice is simple. Never ignore the quiet signs. Speak your truth. Protect your peace. And above all, nurture the bonds that nurture you back. Life has a way of testing us at the worst times. But if you keep your heart steady and your eyes clear, you'll always find your way through. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing who and what you carry forward.